And thanks to everybody who's attending to this conversation this afternoon. We're starting on time and we are going to finish on time at 5 o'clock, so be very efficient. So the Committee for Geelong is exploring the future of work, and these conversations are going to help inform a piece of work going forward that the committee's undertaking. So this one today is focusing on our communities, G21 communities of the future. And my name is Elaine Carbines. I'm the CEO of G21, the Geelong Regional Alliance, if you don't know me. G21 is an alliance of the 5 councils in the broader Geelong region. So City of Greater Geelong, Tiny Borough of Queenscliff, Surf Coast Shire, Colac Otway Shire and Golden Plains Shire. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about G21 and our work and my, I suppose, overview in relation to the communities of our region. But just before we start that, a little bit of information. So we'll be taking notes. This is going to be recorded, this conversation. So careful what you say. We'll be saving the chat. So if you want to ask any questions, raise your hand or use the chat function. And all of this, as I said, will be used and help inform the Committee for Geelong's plan for action going forward. So, so I've just explained we've got those 5 councils in our region, and our population currently, or as the end of last year, was about 340,000 people, which we're growing pretty steadily at 2.5% per annum across the region. And I know when I took up my job at G21, which is 10 years ago, we were actually growing at 1.5%. So most recently in the last 5 years, that growth has accelerated considerably. And, living in this region, you can see that. And particularly in the City of Greater Geelong. City of Greater Geelong has about 260,000 people living in it. It's 75% of the region's population, but it's actually growing faster than the rest of the region. It's growing faster than the state. It's growing at 2.8% per annum. And, if you're in Geelong, although not so much this year with COVID, but you will have noticed the changes. You will notice that we now have little mini traffic jams in the CBD at night time. So, things have changed a lot, particularly in the last 5 years. Before COVID, our economy was performing pretty well, considering where we were 5 or 6 years ago when Alcoa closed its smelter at Point Henry, when Ford announced it was ceasing production of cars in Geelong, the Qantas heavy maintenance fleet had left for Brisbane, along with about 600 or 700 jobs. So, it was a crisis 5 or 6 years ago. So the economy has rebounded a lot, but through COVID, our diverse economy has been hit very hard, particularly the visitor economy and the hospitality industry, the live music industry, the creative arts industry. Unemployment pre-COVID was tracking pretty well along the lines of the state and national averages. But our economy, of course, has been hit very hard due to COVID. And I think everyone would know someone who's lost their job or been stood down from a job or artificially on JobKeeper at the moment, but that's due to end in March. So although our unemployment figures normally track very closely to the state and national average, that figure masks, though, some very high unemployment amongst our most disadvantaged communities in the region. And I noticed Lynn Morgan's here from Northern Futures. So we're talking about Corio, Elaine, Whittington and parts of Colac, and some of the smaller townships as well, high unemployment levels. So we've seen COVID exacerbate that, and we've also seen it hit young people very, very hard. So with our growth that's taking place in this region, we have many opportunities, but it presents many challenges as well. I saw there was an Ipsos poll this week in The Age that the poll said 25% of Melburnians that had been polled were rethinking whether they needed to live in Melbourne. So they were thinking they could live somewhere else, and their regions are looking attractive, because COVID's shown that it doesn't matter where you live now. You can work from wherever you live. So what are the implications for us? Then, of course, we also have in our region, although we've got very, I think, communities that are doing incredibly well economically, we've also got some communities that are really experiencing rental stress. So the City of Greater Geelong's done a major piece of work in relation to that, about the need for social housing. And we are doing some work with them and our 4 smaller councils to look at the need for social housing across our region. And we know that about 5% of the population across the region is experiencing some form of rental stress. So that's low or moderate rental stress. So if you add all that up, it shows that we're at least 6,000 affordable homes short in our region. So thinking about all of those things, and if we turn our attention to the roundtable that the Committee for Geelong held in August, there were some key questions that came out of the conversations. And the first question, which might be a conversation starter here, was how can the G21 community realise the opportunities that come with population growth, but also ensure social cohesion and equity with that growth? How can we break the cycle of entrenched intergenerational disadvantage? Are there new ways going forward? And how do we recognise and respond to diversity in our region and show respect, particularly to our traditional owners of the region, the Wadawurrung and the Eastern Maar peoples? So thinking about all of that, keen to know your ideas, what you have to contribute, observations you have, ideas you have. So please feel free to put up your hand or just talk. That would be great. So over to you. I can see I've got Tony Anderson here. He's normally got something to say. I can't believe you're going to be silent, Tony. You're on mute. No. So Liz Everest is here from Grow. Would you like to make any commentary, Liz, about what Grow's doing in relation to trying to address disadvantage in our region?
Sorry, Elaine, I'm on my phone, so it's
a bit of a delay.
A bit of a delay, I apologise. Look, we're really thinking that what G21 started with Give Where You Live around the Grow project is something that is going to change behaviour in this region so that we can actually take a real sense of ownership over our own communities and our responsibility for them in the way we do business. So I think it's really encouraging that our communities have embraced this concept. We have around 140 Grow signatories who are really saying we can do this ourselves. We can make a difference ourselves. We can do it through how we buy locally, how we procure from social enterprises and Indigenous businesses, and how we employ inclusively as well. So from my point of view, Elaine, I think our region is pretty special. That this idea originated here and it has been embraced here, and it's about looking after all of our communities. Thanks. That's not a question.
Well done. That's a Dorothy Dixer. So Lynn from Northern Futures, what are your
thoughts? My thoughts are how complicated everything is that has to do with people. If it was machines, it'd be just so much easier, wouldn't it? I think Liz is absolutely right. We have been approached by a lot of employers over the last number of months. Even last Monday, I met with an employer who wanted to start a trainee program. Of course, I didn't actually know what that meant, but it sounded good. So let's talk about it. And it came back to we are putting in for a tender, and this tender had nothing to do with a big build. It was something completely different. And I thought, wow, this is really, it's really like the whole ecosystem. So you have grow, and you have that encouragement to have a good social conscience and to do something real about it for your local area. Then you have that encouragement where you get together with others and talk about how they've gone about doing things. And then, you know, it's sort of like, well, you know, let's do something sort of real. One of the things that is a challenge, I suppose, is Northern Futures isn't like a job active. We put people through a program, because that way, putting people through a course, having a mentor, having case management, having, you know, personal development all the way through, actually giving someone a unique pathway into employment, then you're lifting a person's capability, and they start to believe that there is a hope for a positive future for them, and they recognise, my goodness, I can actually learn, I can do things. So by the time we then take people to an employer, we're pretty confident that they have grown and that they are job ready. Obviously, that can't be guaranteed, and we still work with them after that, so the transition continues. And that is really successful in transforming people and helping people to lift their capability. But the issue with that is, if you need something, if you need a course, or you need a pathway, you need something, then that means when all these employers come and say, right, quick, we need X amount of people, get cracking, let's do it. We don't have, 40 people ready for your job, because that's not going to transition people who are really starting from a long way back. And it does take a lot of collaboration to make this happen. It takes understanding on the part of people who are referring in that we can only take people who are really genuinely ready for what we offer. However, we need to know who's out there who can help them at the stage where they are, so that we can all work together and give each other strength. And then we need the educator to be working with us and understanding what we're trying to achieve. And then obviously we need partnerships with employers. So it's one big, massive collaboration. And when you get things like COVID, certainly it complicates everything for everybody, but it uncovers just how under-resourced people are when you realise they have no internet connectivity, they have no computer. So suddenly you're running around getting dongles and delivering laptops and that sort of stuff. It just reinforces the reason we have to try really hard and do the hard stuff, not the token stuff, to genuinely make changes in people's lives. And so you need the grow organisations who will be having those conversations, and the G21s and the community for Geelong, working to help people understand it's not a quick fix or a token, but if you're going to do it properly and do it well, it's worth it.
Yeah. Took a long time to get to this situation. It takes a long time to fix it too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So Phil, out at Newcombe Secondary College, future of education. You've had an amazing year this year, teaching, working at home, trying to learn at home. What are your perspectives about the future of work, the future of learning?
Hi, Elaine, and afternoon, everyone. Well, I suppose I'm echoing a couple of comments here. Where you have a community where there are many challenges in households and connectivity and equipment and the structures within the household themselves, we would have said that over the lockdowns, and the second one in particular, that probably 30% plus of our kids fundamentally disengaged.
Wow.
There's a lot of talk about a few kids in schools who went better because of they didn't have the same sorts of distractions from a classroom, and that's certainly true. But at a school where we service a fundamentally lower SES community, the vast impact was that kids disengaged because they don't have the structures around them to engage. We're now bringing them all back, but there's been a lot of lost momentum in that time. But I'm positive we can claw that back and work with our students to support them as they move forward. My comments on that broader conversation that you were in previously is there's two distinct parts to it. One is what are the structural sort of statewide or nation things that we would want to develop or support or lobby for to improve our community and others, and they can be in a whole range of different areas. But more importantly, what are the action points for sharing information and sharing expertise and supporting each other that we can do at a local level in Geelong, that really is all about we're a decent sized community, but we're quite a connected community. So how can we leverage off the connections that we have, break down the silos so that we can provide that sort of future opportunities for all students, including those communities that are left behind. And I think that there's a combination of supports coming through education that are really important, supports through industry, and supports through a whole range of different organizations that really need to say, okay, what can I do outside my silo and to support a broader community? And if we have that impact and some hopefully relatively low-lying fruit, then I can see that Geelong could operate more as a community and make some real progress that could be a flagship for others.
Thank you. That's interesting. It certainly builds on what Lynn was saying about, you know, the alliances and the collaboration that's needed to be able to take things forward. That's true. So anyone else like to add anything here? You know, what do you see as the challenges? We've talked about some challenges. What do you see as opportunities for our region, for Geelong and our communities and our region?
Elaine, I think it's interesting the conversation that we have around the statistic you gave around people from Melbourne wanting to move. I think that's really fascinating, but I also I've appreciated a lot of the conversations that have come around people being more focused on their local communities. So obviously the time when we weren't able to travel. I hope that's something that does continue, that we do we get to pay more attention about particular aspects of our community. There's a lot of focus on, you know, supporting local and doing that sort of thing. So I think I hope that that's one of the positives that does stay out of COVID, that we do have a little bit more knowledge about the things that are happening in our backyard, given that we haven't got the opportunity to travel as far and wide, and appreciate those positives, but also be aware of some of the negatives and work on those as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. It's certainly it sort of, everyone's life became very small during that time. Certainly if you lived in Melbourne, it did, but it did here as well. Your life became very centered around your home, and it's, you know, it's been good to be able to appreciate more of your local community and your local area. And as you say, Lindy, hopefully we will be able to continue that. That sort of builds on what Liz was talking about in terms of addressing disadvantage. You know, we are through that GROW project trying to support our local community and to you know, spend locally, to procure goods locally, to employ locally. And what we do know, and like Phil talked about, is that we are a very interconnected ecosystem, really. in Geelong. And if it's going to work anywhere, it will work here, because there's so much goodwill and so many, I suppose, alliances and networks in our communities. Probably one of the most networked places I know is Geelong and the broader region. So there's a great amount of goodwill, I think, amongst our people and our leaders to work together to resolve those sorts of complex societal issues. So yeah, thank you, Lindy, for your observations. Anyone else like to contribute? Jen?
I thought I'd just chime in. I'm not sure if Bernadette wanted to talk about some of the things we've discussed in other forums, but from my point of view, and I've missed a couple of the sessions, but having been across a few of them, I think the challenge we have, because I think you said what's the challenge, and I think you said the opportunity, but the challenge is that, you know, we have a lot of great will, but it's also making sure those conversations are connected. So often these sort of forums are literally a chance for me to go, what's going on? You know, what can we do to help facilitate? Because it's not going to be the Committee for Geelong who's going to necessarily solve the problems. It's more that we have some value adds, we have maybe some funding, we have the ability to bring the conversations together like this. And then hopefully what we can do is then participate in some solutions and actions moving forward. So what I'd say is a couple of things that have popped up is that we have a tremendous opportunity because of the current pandemic. I'd like to think we're moving through to whatever it's going to look like in the new norm. And that means digital technologies really come to the forefront. And having heard from educators and people who are just parents, people who've worked in offices and working from home, and what does this all mean? And I think that it's a great time to have this conversation, particularly if we come together and form an agreement on the key things we need and then maybe go to governments. That's probably one big thing. The other big thing is, you know, how do we genuinely have employers engaged and informing how young people particularly are being taught or given experience, and how can we make those networks more solid, if that makes sense, or more permanent. So it's saying things like we've got Northern Futures, which we discussed the other day, obviously as one kind of opportunity for employers to talk about people in the northern suburbs. We've got PTEC doing a great work with their industry engagement, but how do we make that a bit more seamless across the region, and particularly give opportunities to young people who don't have networks, who don't have the natural opportunity to get that internship that will give them the experience. So yesterday we saw some data. I'm going to get this wrong, Bernadette, but the slide that was put up that showed the key things that were blocking, I'm assuming, young people into work, and it was experience and education. And it was a huge part of it. But the experience was more, Bernadette, was it, than the education? Like having experience was the biggest blocker in getting the job.
Yes.
So,
yep. And that's come through and I think it was Phil's slide actually that we were looking at the time. It might have, or it may have been our earlier morning one, but it doesn't matter. But they're absolutely saying that experience is critical. It doesn't matter what that experience is.
That's right. Critical. So all I was going to say is that the role, I'm not an education specialist or anything, but I do see that the bigger challenges are making sure that if we're going to do something that's actually going to have significant impact, is creating the networks, the collaborations, the pathways that will stick, you know, post this discussion and into the future. So I suppose I'd just say that and know that, you know, these conversations have been so valuable because there are some, I'd say, quite clear actions that we could potentially take to move things forward. So I'll leave it at that.
It's interesting. I saw I think a report recently to say that the Elaine area was the second least connected suburb in the state in terms of internet provision. You know, and when you marry that with high unemployment, not finishing school, it becomes a very complex problem to solve. That's for sure.
And your digital hub project, I know. And so I'm just going to jump in and say NBN Co have actually literally just been in touch with me. They want to hold a forum in December, and they want to bring in, they're doing a bigger digital kind of what's called business fiber project. Geelong's been identified. So I think the opportunity is that the group that we're sort of not just forming, but there's other groups that I know Joel Mino is looking at as well, is that we just need to make sure we capture that and have this conversation ongoing, and then actually come up with some things that are going to be valuable.
Yeah. So Kim, you wanted to add something.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks, Jen, to have all this organised too. I think that connected voice stuff is really important. I think we've all seen a bit of a change in the way Geelong is perceived externally, with this one voice that is not necessarily everyone on the same page, but certainly everyone batting for the same projects. And if that's something that could be, I guess, initiated in this sense too, that could only be a win, I think. I don't know if anyone saw Q&A on Monday night, but there was a gentleman called Dr. Simon Longstaff on there. So it's called the Ethics Centre. And he's written a paper that actually highlights the economic and social benefits of having ethics about how you engage. It was quite fascinating, and just the amount of money that is. I'm trying to find it. I'm sorry, I'm talking on the hop. But just the actual financial benefit to your community for having an ethical stance about how you're engaging and what you're bringing to these discussions was extreme. It was, I'm sorry, it's in the report anyway. So from the Deloitte did the actual paper, and it's from the Ethics Centre. But it's all the sorts of things that Grow already does, really, I think. And G21 and probably Northern Arc as well. So it's all those sorts of things that we're looking at trying to do, but just what a difference it made in the community. So it's almost the paper that could back up how good this is and why it's a good thing to do for our community, I think. Sorry, I've segued slightly.
Thanks, Kim. That's really good. Troy, did you have some observations? I saw you put something in the chat.
Thanks for that, Elaine. Okay, so it's very much what I wanted to point out, very similar thinking to Jen in regards to my role at the Gordon, being facilities manager, is very much about service or helping the academic departments achieve what they need to achieve. So having an understanding about their potential problems or issues is certainly beneficial for myself to be able to help them obviously overcome some of those things. But what's also important, I also am involved with some of the government stimulation programs. So recently being funded, the Gordon being funded, which you would have seen in the media. And what's really interesting and important is they do focus on ensuring that when I do these projects that I use local community first. So which is a good thing for myself, because obviously it helps my organisation, but it also helps the local tradies, so to speak. But that's pretty much that's all I'm observing at the moment. But it's good to sit back and listen to everybody talk about it.
Yeah, no, it's good. And the Gordon's been a really good signatory to the Grow Compact. And, we need big employers like the Gordon and big procurers like the Gordon and others to actually help drive the fundamental shift in the region in terms of, making sure that local people, local businesses, local communities are actually supported. So that's very important. So I know we've got a couple of people here from Regional Development Victoria. We've got Meg and Lynn. Can't see them, their names are just there. But I'm interested from either of you or both of you, from government's perspective, what do you know about government policy in relation to regions like ours in terms of addressing disadvantage, in terms of the future of the work. So I'd be really interested, Meg or Lynn. I see Meg's actually gone off mute, so I'll throw to Meg.
Thanks, Elaine. I don't think anybody would be unaware of the problem of political cycles. And I think for looking at this stuff and just listening to everybody's comments, and I did miss the question, I'm sorry, I logged in 8 minutes late, but I'm assuming it's...
We're just talking about opportunities and challenges. How do we bring everyone along? How do we make sure as we grow and become economically more prosperous, bring everyone?
So G21 and GROW, very place-based and very, you know, tackling particularly in the disadvantaged space and what GROW does. You know, it needs a generation to actually measure impact. And that is the hardest thing that we find. And Northern Futures would be aware of this. Anybody that's relying on government funding to run programs, and you know, it is such an ordeal to every couple of years reapply to have that sustainability to actually get to a point where you can say to government, look, we're making an impact. So yes, there's going to be short-term wins, and a lot of the smaller projects will show short-term wins, but when you actually measure, have we made a difference in our disadvantaged cohorts? Are we getting better education attainment rates? Are we getting better pathways to jobs? It sometimes can take a generation of change, particularly when you're looking at the interventions in those earlier years. You know, I'm preaching to the converted. I think everybody around this table knows that. But how do you actually make government work to that and, you know, have that sort of bipartisan support to addressing these really wicked problems? And it is something that, you know, 10 years at RDV, I haven't seen much change in. And it's, I think, you know, COVID's actually shown us that government can be really responsive, and the way government's working in the COVID environment is across pillars rather than departments. And with the Crisis Committee of Cabinet, you know, you've got people from all of the various departments, but they're actually running pillars rather than departments. And so we're working a lot better across government through this period. So I feel like there's real progression happening there. But when you look at these sort of wicked comprehensive problems that we're trying to make real change in and affect change, you need that long-term commitment to the programs. But it is a bit of a win getting local jobs first. Minister Marino couldn't stop talking about it yesterday at her Future of RDA's presentation, Elaine. You'd be happy to hear that. It was all about local jobs first.
That's good to hear, because we haven't actually had the a lot of buy-in for GROW from the federal government. So that's good that they're starting to talk our language. That's great to hear. Really good.
Yeah, so no solutions, but you know, I think they are listening, and I think, you know, maybe there is some change afoot, and we just have to keep, you know, pushing forward with that advocacy and making sure the message is heard loud and clear about that long-term commitment needed to affect real change.
And of course, government is our largest procurer.
Absolutely.
You know, government spends so much money on so many services, and you know, we need government to actually get with the program. And thankfully, as part of the city deal that's been negotiated, the $370 million city deal, we've managed to get agreement at the state and federal government level to build those local procurement clauses into the contracts for construction and operation, ongoing operation of those facilities that will come out of the city deal. So that was a major.
Yeah, it was a real first, that one, just to see that actually happen and to see that pathway and be a precedent for future contracts. And I think now with this local jobs first coming forward from a Commonwealth and a state view, we've just had a whole lot more procurement policy to read and get up to speed on. Lynn would be aware of that. And it's all about local jobs first.
It's good to hear. So I'm going to throw to you again, Tony. Union movement, trades hall. What are you seeing about the future of work? Would you like to make any comments?
I've just been sitting back, Elaine.
I know. It's not like you, Tony.
I've been listening to too many Zoom meetings. Depends on what you're looking at. right? You can have a discussion about how do the younger generation get the next set of skills that we spoke about at a previous meeting a couple of days ago, right? And I could sit here and say, let's talk about what used to be handbrake turn, and then it became U-turn. Now that disappeared because one of the issues that came out of that was that when they looked for assistance, the government of the day, the federal government of the day, actually had a view that if you had those kids go back to school, that was not listed as an outcome. And so you didn't get funded. Right? So the ability to be able to actually interact, get some skills, panel beating, repair an engine or whatever at that stage, eventually close the doors. Right? So how do you actually generate that? The other questions over the future of work, it's a question over when we talk work, right? And I keep on coming back to this, and I've said it within the union movement as well. Not everyone's going to be able to get an upper class job, right? Now, Ford went, Alcoa went, and all the rest of it. But a lot of people just wanted a job, go to work, raise a family, and all the rest of it, which was a job technically for life. And so you had your what was classified as blue collar work, right? And when you're aiming for the blue collar type jobs, there's not a lot of those work around here, right? So you're trying to actually organise a whole heap of people to try and get work, right? And I don't know whether or not a lot of people understand the point of looking at political economics and not just economics in itself, but looking at how the people fit into the economic structure of the country's fiscal policy, right? So if you're looking at political economics, you've then got to factor in. So there's a couple of ways that we could look at it from the union movement, from a perspective that if you've still got high unemployment, then you've got more to choose from. But then people won't hang around waiting for all that. So you end up with a high issue with maybe crime and all the rest of it. If you look for a policy in full employment, then people have an issue about wages. You know, and so you then got to figure out whether or not we're looking for full employment and we're looking to actually get everyone into a job, but then you've got to have the jobs to go with it. And being that you're looking at whether or not you can get everyone into what I would deem a white collar type, professional type job, we know that that's not going to be feasible, right? Because there's not a lot around it. And I'll go back to when we had Q&A in Geelong, and after that meeting in the Q&A in Geelong, I actually had people down in the foyer at GPAC telling me that they've got masters and degrees and everything else. Even get a job washing dishes. So it's a question over what jobs are we looking for, because coming from Ford myself, what I've always said during the redundancy is that when people leave an industry after you've been institutionalised in that industry, that's virtually all you know for all your life. And most of them will gravitate back to that type of industry. So, and you're going to have about a third of people that have been made redundant that won't get ever work again, because you've got people out there that we had people that you would not necessarily employ. You had to actually talk to them and get to know them to actually understand it. And I made this same comment at another forum last year around September, that how does the government, either government, state, federal, doesn't matter, but how do they see the training programs going in when major business, large business is actually being shut down? You can't expect small business to carry the can. They don't have the resources, all the funding, all the ability to actually do the training like the larger companies have. So you have a problem where how do you train the next lot of be it tradespeople coming in? There's shortage of those. You've got shortage of blue collar jobs, white collar jobs, and you can't fit them in. It's the issue of political economics. Do we want to actually create employment? And sorry to say, but we know that manufacturing creates a lot of jobs. It's a question over, do we want to grow manufacturing for engineering jobs, the expertise, the whole lot that we see in other countries? That's something that's got to be looked at, because I reckon coming from the northern suburbs, growing up in Norlane, Corio, personally, very hard. Normally the last suburb to get most things given to you, be it the internet, be it whatever. You've got to be able to talk to those people in their language, and that's the hard part. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's good, and something that Northern Futures does really well. It's really been a circuit breaker in the northern suburbs on, small scale, but needs a lot of support going forward. I know that for certain. So where are the jobs going to come from in our region in the future? If we think about where the jobs are now, we have lots of jobs in the visitor economy, which has obviously suffered very hard this year. Hospitality, we have a lot of jobs. Our main employer is health in our region, across the whole suite of health services. Education, we've got agribusiness in our region, high-end manufacturing. We've really diversified our economy very strongly from where it was 15, 20 years ago. But where are the new opportunities? Do you see renewable energy as a new opportunity for our region? Where are those new jobs going to come from? I mean, we've got I think Australia's largest wind farm going up in our region. Currently, it's being constructed at the moment. Where are those new jobs going to come from? Any ideas? Any thoughts?
The thought for that would be, you could look at hydrogen. You could
Yes.
look at manufacturing the wind farms out at the old Ford plant. You could look at solar panel and manufacturing and all the rest of it. It still comes back to, like I said, it's the want of the government to actually implement that, because you're going to have to give some support to the industry. Coming from another meeting on hydrogen, we know that the Japanese were trying to convert their coal-fired plants into hydrogen. And so at a previous forum, the question that I asked again was, are you looking to manufacture it here, the hydrogen, utilise the hydrogen, manufacture it and utilise it for our benefit, just not sell it off and then create jobs that we actually create in this country that are able to actually sustain and grow actual manufacturing type plants? I couldn't get that answer. I would see it though that if we wanted to really go somewhere as a country, we need to actually look at a lot of infrastructure, solar panel, and make it here, make the wind farms, do the whole lot. But on top of that, also create the manufacturing process so that we're actually selling that stuff, not just sort of giving it to them to actually utilise. Like if the Japanese are using it to actually convert coal-fired plants, then the question I asked is that, well, why can't we do that here?
Yeah.
Right, to save on, because one of the biggest costs that most businesses would have, right, is electricity, gas, and water. Right, and because they're virtually regulated from a union's perspective, you've only got the labour rates to come back on. If you've got cheaper electricity, and I take the Ford plant, I think it's pronounced Pelica, I think I could pronounce it wrong, the new owners of the Ford plant, they're actually putting on solar panels, batteries, all the rest of it on that site, so that power and electricity is not a cost to the renter that they rent it out to now. Right? Now that's an individual putting that in. One would think that the government might want to invest in that to actually help businesses be able to get on the front foot and be able to compete where power is not a cost.
Yeah, it's very, very important going forward that we minimise energy costs, and we have a very diversified energy supplies, and renewables certainly play their part. I know there's a lot of interest in hydrogen in our region, and you know, there's an application being put in at the moment for a very large battery complex at Moorabool. So there's certainly a lot of interest in our region about that. So we've been asked in the last 10 to 15 minutes to think about, and I hope everyone's going to contribute to this, what your preferred future for our region looks like in terms of shifting entrenched disadvantage, in terms of social cohesion and equity, and then responding, recognising and responding to diversity. So what does your preferred future for our region, what does it look like? What are some of the words you'd use to describe a preferred future? You know, we know what we've got now, but where do we want to be in 30 years' time, in 2050, when our population will have grown to well over 500,000 people in our region? You know, we'll be a really booming region in terms of population. How do we make those seismic changes, though, in relation to entrenched disadvantage, cohesion and equity? So keen for anyone to comment. Don't be shy.
I'll have a go, Elaine.
Thank you. Liz?
I'm going to follow on with the theme, but I have a vision that everyone who comes to Geelong will embrace that sense of collective responsibility for all of our community. And in this region, if you come here, the expectations are that you, without question, buy locally, employ locally, and support the most disadvantaged cohorts as part of those processes. And it's just business as usual. It isn't like anything, you know, untoward. It's actually what we expect when you come here. You want to be part of this place, you do it for everyone here, and that just should be an unthinking, accepted view that we all look after each other and make it work. And for that to happen, we have to use the principles that everyone's mentioned today around collaboration, but make it active and meaningful collaboration, and active and meaningful and accountable collaboration. And so I guess that's my vision, Elaine, and it's nothing very surprising for you and entirely ambitious, but that's what I'd love to see.
Yes, same with me. We want that to be business as usual. So anyone else, what's your preferred future look like for our region?
I would love to see the stigma disappear, and for people to understand that it was a systematic you know, thing that happened that caused the disadvantage in the north. There was so many jobs that disappeared, they just could not be absorbed. It was not individuals deciding, he needs to work, I'll just go on the dole. And so I would love to see a whole lot more respect and a lot more appreciation of the strengths and the resilience and the community in the north, and that inclusion, so that, you know, like Liz, I'd love to see that inclusion of everybody, and not because I kind of think if we can get away from some of the stigma and it's just passed on, and having spoken, say, to some of the leaders programs with the committee for Geelong, and I had a number of people come to me afterwards, and I'm a bit shocked, and they're a bit shocked that they didn't know how we got there, and that they kind of assumed, well, people choose, you know, this kind of stuff. I'd love to see that all gone.
Good point, Lynn. I think many of us share that view. Anyone else? Don't be shy. Liz, Jen, sorry.
I know, I sort of feel like, am I able to comment? I'm just going to post it in the chat because I'll just type away. But at the committee, when we did our strategic planning, basically, we've been very committed to social and economic prosperity as the language. Now, that has not always been met with enthusiasm. So, and I'm not saying that we have arguments about it. I think the overwhelming support is that social prosperity is inextricably linked, but it's not usually the language we hear coming from government, not always. So I think the challenge for us is to, and the opportunity is to show how that can work, and Grow does that. But, you know, there's a whole range of things we do, but just being really strong on that language. What does it mean to actually be prosperous? And it's, you know, it flows through in the language of government. I also added in there because I was just thinking, gosh, what jobs would I like to see? I think the role of our Aboriginal, you know, well, I'd say the traditional owners, but all of our Aboriginal community, there's tremendous opportunity for us to leverage their heritage, history, storytelling, culture in an economic way. Now, I think that by default, that's a socially prosperous approach as well. And I think that I thought I'd just use that as an example, that I think it's just there as something that we could really embrace and pursue and support here locally. And I just thought I'd use that as an example.
That's very important. That's good. Enjoyed that contribution. Thank you. So, come on, there's been some people there that are sitting there thinking. Share your ideas.
Liz has gone for spiritually prosperous. I thought I'd just say in the chat, and I'm like, Liz, hang on.
I know. I'm just pushing
off mute
there, but I really do think that the Aboriginal cultural heritage is something that we can build on so much more than just from the point of view of a bit of artwork. And spiritually might be the wrong word, but it's something about that deeper connection that we are missing as a community, and that we have an opportunity to really enrich our lives through those connections, I guess is what I'm trying to say, Jen.
Very well said. So I'm going to throw to Cheryl now.
Okay, well, I've had a few comments, but they've bubbled along the way, so I'll just mention them. Some of the opportunities that I think have come about this year, and maybe it's as a result of COVID, but the way people have had to respond to it. I think all of a sudden people have realised how important family and community is. They have realised how important it is to share resources. I know in the networks that I'm involved in education, I've never seen such great sharing. It's been amazing that people have been so generous with their knowledge and their resources. And I think that's something I'd love to see going on into the future, that people are willing to do that. For Geelong, I see health and education and the arts are areas where there's a great opportunity for us to be something different. And I'd love to see opportunities happening in those areas that perhaps haven't before. I think we have a genuine challenge with our young people. We need to make sure that they're included, that they have a voice in what's happening now and into the future. I think there's a real risk that there can be a generation of young people that are left behind if we're not actively in all of the areas that we work in, making sure that they're part of processes. So I see that as a real challenge, and that's in all areas, not just young people who are disadvantaged. I think young people overall. And I do think there's a really important role for people who have businesses, who are involved in industries, to provide opportunities for young people into the future. I think it's really important to think of ways that they can be nurtured along, be mentored along. So I see that's something that can certainly grow as well.
Thank you. Appreciated that. And certainly I think Phil's contribution, we talked about 30% of the student body becoming disengaged in the second lockdown. That's absolutely very concerning. You know, and there's so many things that young people have missed out on because of COVID. And, you know, it's hard enough for we adults to really understand and get our heads around it. But for young people on the cusp of their lives, you know, it's been quite devastating, I think. So
Well,
Phil,
yeah, several people have mentioned the importance of experience for future jobs, and even the basics of things like structured workplace learning this year has been just stopped, because obviously if you've got a business, you're not going to be encouraging extra people to be coming into that business that may be spreading a disease. So it's something to be aware of, and as we open up, to be maybe a bit more open about welcoming young people in so they can gain that experience. They all know that they're going to have not just one job in the future, they have to gain skills in such a wide variety of areas, because they'll all have 7, 8, 9 different jobs throughout their lifetime. It's no longer a possibility to be in the one area for the rest of their lives.
That's a point well made. I know with my own children, who both had got a degree from Deakin, but then struggled to get work because they didn't have any experience. You know,
Yes.
all the key selection criteria experience in this role, you know, a minimum 3 years experience in this type of work. So it is really limiting to put those sort of clauses into key selection criteria, because it stops so many young people from being considered. That's for sure. So it's a point well made, Cheryl. That's for sure. So we've got about 3 minutes. Anyone else dying to say something? Mim, would you like to say something?
I don't know how much I've got to contribute. Something that was just said made me think of, obviously with COVID, there's been JobKeeper and JobSeeker, and I was reflecting, you know, it's like an experiment in a universal income kind of situation. I don't know anything about how much a universal income has been trialled overseas or whatnot. I think Scandinavian countries have higher taxes and more welfare. I mean, students get we've got what's it called, Centrelink at uni. I had it, I don't remember what it's called, but you know, the job seek, you know, the need for experience, which you were just talking about, Elaine, and I had a similar experience coming out of uni with my science degree, not having the experience.
Yes.
And how do you get a job? Internships can help in that regard. Internships can be a range of different things. They can be like a couple of days, or they can be full time. And if you're not getting paid, if they're non-paid internships, like not many businesses can afford to offer internships where they're also paying but also training. Especially, I think Tony was talking about, you know, small and medium businesses can't afford that kind of outlay in terms of training. And so, you know, just those different ideas around in my head just made me think, oh, well, I mean, we've got JobKeeper and JobSeeker happening at the moment. I know it's a huge impact on the economy, but if that was in the future coupled with, you know, you get JobKeeper or JobSeeker, if you are in an internship, a business can have you on, you can get the on-the-job training. This is probably, no, not probably. I know this is not a new idea, but yeah, that would be really cool. How could we do that in the Geelong region?
Yeah, and there's certainly new funds for apprenticeships and trainees, but we need to extend that beyond
yeah, apprenticeships and trainees is a sector. Like,
yes, we need
like as a scientist wanting to get into maybe the mining industry, or you know, a teacher wanting to, you can do relief teaching as a teacher, and you can get that relatively.
It's not very satisfying, I have to tell you. I've done it.
I loved
the hardest type of teaching.
I did years of relief teaching. I loved it. Gaining experience along the way. It was great. But anyway, that's just
no, it's a point well made. Thank you for that. We do need to find new ways of supporting the experience that young people need to gain, and not just with apprenticeships and traineeships. It needs to be broader than that, to encompass everybody. There you go, fund all degrees. Well done. Okay, well, it's right on 5 o'clock. Thank you so much for your contribution today. I've found it really stimulating and interesting. I do feel great optimism about our region and the way we work together and the good people that are working here and leading, schools, Lynn at Northern Futures, people working on Grow, Jen at Community for Geelong, you all, you're contributing enormously. And I do feel this is a region that cares about people in the region. I think we've got more optimism here than we would in the suburbs of Melbourne, for example. And we've got more capability here to address these really tricky societal questions going forward. So thank you for your contribution today. It's been really interesting. I look forward to seeing the output that we're going to get from Jen and Bernadette and Stephanie, and to contribute to the future of work discussion that the Committee for Geelong is leading. So thanks everyone. I've really appreciated your involvement, and we'll catch you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. It was fantastic. Thank you, everyone. And see you tomorrow at our closing session.
See you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.